All right, now as we celebrate Women's Month, we explore how families are coping amid gender-based violence and femicide that's crippling the country's communities. Urbanization has had a huge impact on the upbringing of children as many parents move to cities in search for employment. And with many single parent-headed households, it's not easy to trust neighbors to look after children after school hours when parents are at work. Let's discuss this further now with motivational speaker Tosama Nogolo. Ms. Nogolo, good morning, rather good afternoon, and thank you very much for your time. You know, last year when we speak Women's Month, I remember last year the President made a very powerful yet poignant statement that if we as a nation were to be judged on how we treat women, we could fare very badly. It's 2022. We have reported on even greater atrocities against women since that last speech. Is this perhaps indicative of a weak policing system or a society which has lost its moral fabric?
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. Indeed, I think it's both. You know, if I may answer your question, it's both. Yes, we have a very weak policing system, and our moral fiber is getting thinner every day. We are in a society that does not value women. We are in a society that does not respect women for who they are. And when a woman was created to be a helper, taken from the rib of a man. And now, when we are destroying the helpers, who is going to remain behind to help our societies?
So how do we tackle this problem? Do we focus on perhaps protecting the would-be victims, which are women in most cases? Or do we then now focus on the boy child? Because we've heard how men who are predominantly the perpetrators of GBV need to be part of any solution around ending GBV. How important is it to actually teach them and sort of press some sort of a reset button here around gender norms or stereotypes to show boys that the expectations they had before of what are roles of women has changed?
You know, maybe let's start by saying today's children, as we speak about the boy child, today's children are children of children, because we have a lot of teenage pregnancy these days. And now we have very young parents who do not yet understand what it is to be a parent. And therefore, I would say, as older women, we need to rise up. We need to be there to make sure that we hold our children by their hand so that our grandchildren would grow to be strong people, to be people with a strong moral fiber. And again, taking the boy child, I think when I raise a boy child, unfortunately, we have fatherless societies, and now it remains the role of this woman, it remains the role of a mother to raise children, and raising a boy child. But as I'm raising my boy child, I must teach him and I must raise him to be somebody else's husband one day. I must raise him with respect myself, and the way I treat myself and the way I do things, I must respect myself and show respect, because children are copycats, so that they see and then they do.
But Mam Tosama, given that most of these households, we had women heading the households, one would have assumed that that would lead to men having greater regard for women because they're raised by women. But somehow this has not been the case. There are those harmful gender stereotypes that continue and somehow are perpetuated in society. So how do women and men correct those harmful stereotypes, particularly around the younger age group of boys? Because there's also the problem of culture, which has its own role. Great, it can be great at times, but it's also destructive.
It's that culture that I want to talk about, because if we can practice what I call ibuyambo, going back to the olden ways of doing things. Remember, I think when we end, should I say, end our democracy, we kind of threw the baby with the bathwater, because some of the things that were being practiced, or some of the practices from the olden days, were working. We would have omalume, your uncles, you would have your brothers, who must be the models, the role models of this boy child that you, as a single mother, is raising here. So they must be role models to this boy child. You would have a teacher, whom you look up to. That teacher at school, when you send your child to school, must be a role model to your child. You would have a reverend in churches. When you send your child, or you go with your child to church, they must look up to the reverend or to the pastor and see that this person is a person that I can look up to. I want to look like this person. But unfortunately, our children look to so and so within our communities, who is a drug addict, who is a gun person, who uses guns, and they look up to those people and want to be like them. And I think if we can go back to some of the olden ways of doing things, and as a family be all involved in raising this child. You have a boy child, you have a brother. Your brother must be a role model to this especially boy child. Not that we must leave girls behind, because they must also be taught to a no to be a no. They must also be taught to love themselves and to respect themselves.
And then on the side of the police, because clearly it is the role of both communities, like we've just dissected, as well as the police. What is their role, honestly, in this? Because for the longest time, we keep hearing that they lack the capacity, and they constantly have imbizos where the minister would say it can not only be police, it's got to be community members who also assist, because we live among these perpetrators. We know which woman is being abused. We know we should be offering shelter to that family, but we turn a blind eye. But how much of a role can police play, or should be playing?
Probably not only look at the police, because there are other services that can maybe assist us before the damage is done. We have NGOs in our communities. We have government departments who can also play a role within communities, a role of education and more education, to teach women that do not keep quiet. Do not be silent. Let's go to the police. When I go to the police station as a woman, I must be treated with respect. There must be, we must use those private rooms where I will get the interview, and stop this thing of saying it is a domestic matter. Go back home, talk about it. When I say I have come to lay a charge, that must be done. Nobody must question me about it. It is my right to do so. They must do that. But we still find these days, police would say, no, this is a domestic matter. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Go home and talk about it. Gone are those days, because I would die talking about it. And where will they be? What would they say? Nothing. It was a mistake. That's what we would hear.
And truth be told, they're not counsellors, and the minister has actually spoken out against this to say, allow a woman to press charges, do not try and attempt to help them resolve the matter. That is for another person to do. It's not your area of specialization. But beyond this, if we talk about the would-be deterrence, just last week we heard of the proposal of chemical castration, or it was brought back into the debate, national debate. Some said it really wouldn't serve the purpose of dealing with the deep-rooted issue that has caused the rape epidemic in the country. What's your view around chemical castration?
The challenge is, when we talk about perpetrators, we would say a person is a perpetrator because there's this right that a person is not guilty until proven so. So my view in that is that it may affect people who are really innocent, because we have seen these things happening. A person would be sentenced, and years later we would find that this person was actually not guilty of anything. So I still have mixed feelings about that. I'm not really, until I am convinced otherwise, but for now I don't think I am for it.
Ms. Nogolo, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. That was social worker Tosama Nogolo.